I really don't know of any other period in human history like this moment. I really don't. I look at all the young architects in this room, you're all 20, 21, 22, 23, and I wonder what this world's going to look like when you're my age. This is a singular moment. We're going to make a decision in your lifetime and your children on whether we want to save this species and this planet. I truly believe it. And time is running out. I'm going to ask all the camera people, you have to go in the back, excuse me, in Italian, no more cameras. I'm used to a classroom, you have to go in the back, you too. I'm used to classrooms for 40 years, no cameras. Go, you have to sit or leave. All the way in the back. Now we have the proper decorum to be able to think. Let me start by sharing an anecdote, because I think it's instructive to the challenges you architects will face as you lead us in, hopefully, to a new era. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me early on to come to Berlin to help her government address the question, how do we grow the German economy in the 21st century? This was before the meltdown. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the Chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do we grow the German economy? How do we grow the European Union economy? How do we grow the global economy in the last stages of a great energy era? This is what's not being talked about at G8 or G20. We are in the sunset of a great energy revolution that created for a short moment one of the great civilizations in history. Coal, oil, natural gas, uranium. Does anyone here think we're in the sunrise of these energies? Anybody? Sunsets take a long time. And during this dangerous twilight period, we have to ask the question, what do we do? It's all about fossil fuels. If we save this species, I try to imagine what our species in 10,000 years from now will think when they look back at this moment. It's only been 10,000 years since the beginning of agriculture and civilization. They're going to look back, there'll be no more monuments, the pyramids will be gone. The only record they will ever have that we were here is our CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide footprint in the geological record, and they'll say, oh yes, back then they were the oil people. They lived off the burial grounds of the Jurassic Age. They created a great but short-lived civilization, but we almost lost the planet. It is all about fossil fuels. We grow our food in petrochemical fertilizers and pesticides. All of our construction materials that you use are fossil fuel based. Most of our clothes, almost all of our pharmaceutical products, our power, transport, heat, our light, our entire supply chain, our logistics, all of the infrastructure of this planet, the architecture of this civilization. Is it on? The architecture of this civilization, let me turn this up slightly. The architecture of this civilization is based off of fossil fuel culture. And now in this twilight period, we have three crises. They're feeding off each other, and they have put your generation in the eye of the perfect storm in history. Number one, the global economic meltdown. Number two, the energy crisis. Number three, we're now facing the real-time impacts of climate change on agriculture this morning. Let me start with the meltdown. This is not I disagree with many of my colleagues on this. This is not a credit crisis. This is not a financial crisis. This is not a crisis of deregulation of the market. That's the result of the crisis. The crisis is the second industrial revolution based on centralized electrification, the auto culture, and suburban construction. It all peaked 20 years ago. This is what they're not talking about in government. It is not simply symbolic that General Motors went down this month. After World War II, in America, then in Europe, we matured the second industrial revolution. We built out the interstate highways and the autobahns and the autostradas. We moved into suburban construction, which jump-started the economy. And that automobile and centralized electricity had a multiplier effect through the roof, from steel production to travel and tourism. We overbuilt the second industrial revolution suburban rollout in the late 80s, and we went into a global recession because of overbuild. We came out of the recession in '91, but how did we come out of the recession? We did not have a third industrial revolution in place with the same multiplier effect as the auto age and centralized electricity. So without a third industrial revolution, what we did is we began to eat up all the savings of the second industrial revolution to move the global economy. We issued credit cards. Here in America, we went into credit cards so we could go back to make the goods and services and move the global economy. And let me remind you that the first principle of globalization was that American consumers would buy the goods of the world and raise everybody's boat. The delusion was that it was based on some kind of new productive economic engine that was on the same par as the auto age. It was all false. So after we maxed out our credit cards, we developed these strange credit instruments for home mortgages, no money down, pay the interest 10 years later, use your home as an ATM machine to refinance it so you have cash, because we're seeing stagnant wages since 1988. Look at Fiat, look at General Motors. In the mature economies of Europe and America, the height of that auto age was the late 80s. The average family savings in my country was 9% in 1991. For the last 3 years, it's been 0 or negative, and we have a new term called negative income, which is an oxymoron. The Brits followed us right to the abyss, as they normally do. In continental Europe, you kept your savings rate at about 14%. You may be able to weather the storm. Let me explain how bad this is. President Obama has put together a $2 trillion recovery. But now let me tell all of you architects what the total accumulated household debt is in the United States this morning. $14 trillion. Yeah, you have the right expression. We're not going to make up 20 years of living off debt magically in 1 year. And then the question before all of our masters of the universe and the business community, by what magic are you going to rebuild the economy? Since the second industrial revolution is in life support, the energy regime it's based on is maturing and sunsetting. Where's the engine? Global economic meltdown, sunset of the second industrial revolution. Deep in debt. The second assumption of globalization, cheap energy. Take our capital, move it to cheap labor markets in Asia, let them produce our